George Theodore was drafted by the New York Mets in the late rounds of the 1969 June draft. By 1973, Theodore broke spring training with the team and quickly made an impression on both his teammates and fans. He was nicknamed the Stork. George Theodore, a member of the 1973 NL Champs, joins us on the Mets Rewind podcast next.
Celebrate in Queens once again. And the Mets win the ball game. Michael Conforto with his first career walk-off hit. And the Mets pull it out at the bottom of the ninth. What an inning. What a game. What a night. What a streak.
George Theodore, affectionately known as the Stork, was a member of the 1973 National League champions. He joins the Mets Rewind podcast today. George, where did the Stork, that nickname, come from?
AAA Tidewater, 1972. My teammate Jim Gosker saw me holding a baby and then said, "Hey, you must be the Stork." That part's not quite true, but he did give me the nickname, the Stork, and someday you'll have to talk to Jim and ask him why he did.
Very good, but it wasn't the only nickname that you had. It kind of evolved over your tenure with the team. I heard you were once nicknamed Othello, and then the Masher, and then the Volga Boatman. Where did those nicknames come from?
Those nicknames came from me. When I first signed, there was a questionnaire we filled out. And in the questionnaire, I was having lots of fun with it, giving all kinds of answers. And then it said your nicknames. And so I made up a bunch of nicknames. And the Volga Boatman was an ancient folk song. The Masher I made up. I had a lot of fun with that and not thinking anything of it. And yet, from that questionnaire, it followed me all through baseball. And I didn't realize this is going to be sort of the blue book that people looked up and found out about you.
You were selected by the Mets in the 31st round in June 1969. This is before the internet, before social media, before they televised MLB drafts. How did you find out? I mean, that day of the draft, were you sitting by the phone waiting for a phone call?
No, but, I was told somehow that I was drafted.
Okay.
But I didn't hear from the Mets or anybody. And then I'm just kind of in limbo thinking, I'm going to go to graduate school in the fall. And well, then a bird dog scout, John Odell, called me a week or so after and said, "Are you interested in signing?" And I says, "Absolutely, you bet. This has been my dream." And then he says, "Well, what would it take to sign you?" Well, I didn't think about that. And then I just says, well, I threw out a number. How about $3,000? That'll pay for my graduate school when I go. He got back to me and sent the message to Roy Partee, who was the regional scout of our area that eventually did sign me. And
after you get signed, you begin negotiating your own contracts year after year. This was before free agency, and that became kind of a fun process for you. You would write a letter, and you asked for some interesting things along the way. Can you kind of share some of those letters and some of the requests you made with the team?
Well, at the time, the players didn't have any power. You either accepted their contract or you didn't play, and you couldn't go to another team or anything. There was no free agency, really, and the reserve clause was there. And so I had fun with negotiating with Joe McDonald, the general manager of the Mets, and that even though our negotiations were about maybe $25 a month for 4.5 months, went from $500 to $525 or something like that. So I used to throw in different things to Joe McDonald, such as I wanted a half dozen bats, and I gave him the name and the dimensions and that. I wanted some stickers at one point. I wanted a new pair of glasses. I wanted to meet Yogi Berra, and also if I became the most popular player, I would get a guitar. So these were some of the kind of things I threw in with Joe, and he enjoyed them because there'd never been anything like that, I think, that he'd had to deal with.
So let's talk about Joe Frazier, George. You played for him in the minors for a number of years, and Met fans really don't know a lot about him. What was your experience with him, both as a manager and a person off the field?
I remember I made an error in Class A ball out in left field, and he sent a guy out to take my place right there.
Wow.
I come in storming, but again, we just forget about it the next day and that. And I was fortunate to have him. 3 or 4 years I got to play for Joe Frazier, and I thought I enjoyed him, even though he was kind of tough exterior at times. He was tough. He wouldn't get too involved with the players socially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember once, I think it was 1970 maybe 70. One of our players from Texas was a real Southerner with knowing politeness and manners and everything. And we're on the bus, and we get off to go have some dinner after we had lost a game. And Donnie Dickerson said to him as he's getting off the bus, "Mr. Frazier, would you like to have supper with us?" And Joe looked at him and says, "I'm particular who I eat with." So I never forgot that. So anyway, after all the success we'd had in the minor leagues, I thought he'd be a good fit up there in the major leagues, but
Whitey Herzog, and his name comes up often, about highly regarded throughout baseball as a great talent evaluator. What was your relationship like with him?
Whitey was the head of the minor leagues when I signed.
Okay.
And he would come and go, and he would, evaluate guys, but I didn't ever have conversations with him, per se. He was one who I think was always talking to the managers about the different players, but I didn't recall him talking to me.
Okay.
The one time I did have a conversation with him is my second year of 1971. I was, after hitting 300 at Visalia, I was due to play at Memphis AA. I'm there, and for 2 weeks, I'm not hitting or I'm not batting at all, not playing at all. And the manager, whose name was Johnny Antonelli, not the pitcher from the Giants, didn't really think I fitted in with the way he managed and that. And they were about to release me when Whitey Herzog pulled me aside and said, "We're sending you back to Visalia because Joe Frazier had said, 'Don't release him, send him back to me.'" And that was when I had my best year in baseball and was the most valuable player in the California League. I was on the verge of being released. And then after that wonderful year I had, negotiating with Joe McDonald in my letter was, if I can't make it to AAA next year, you'll give me my release because I won't play there for that manager. Luckily enough, I had a pretty good spring and ended up playing for Hank Bauer in AAA.
You played winter ball in 72 as well at San Pedro de Macorís.
Yeah.
You called that the poorest place on earth in the Dominican Republic. Was that your first time out of the country? And what made you describe it the poorest place on earth? What did you see?
I did play one winter for a month in Mexico. And again, I saw a lot of poverty there. And in the Dominican, the poverty was, the people were living in these little shacks and things, and no running water, no sewage and things like that. So it just was kind of heartbreaking to see that, and yet this city became the breeding ground for some of the greatest players. At one point, there were 8 shortstops in the major leagues from San Pedro. That was kind of what we'd see. We'd have these little kids come up to us, shoe shine, and we'd always give them a few pesos or so. So that was it. I also played in Venezuela. Some of those places, I came back after a month because I got sick from the water. But in the Dominican, I stayed the whole year, and I was with a team that was affiliated with the Houston Astros. So at that time, Hub Kittle was the manager there, and he was a longtime coach in the organization of Houston. But I also played with the most dominant pitcher I've ever seen in my life. It was scary to me, James Rodney Richard. And under those poor lights, because the conditions are not like they are now, they've got some beautiful stadiums and lights and that. It was just scary how hard he could throw. His fastball and his slider was just almost as fast. So
you had mentioned that he had to cut short one of his seasons because he burnt his foot cooking fried chicken in his room.
That was the deal. We're down there and we're staying in a hotel, and he's cooking for himself. I think his wife was with him too, and and he spilled some of that oil on his foot, and so the last part of the season we didn't have him for the playoffs. Yeah, that's a true story. He did. He burned his foot and he couldn't pitch last part of the year.
We are on the phone with George Theodore. You know him as the Stork if you're a Mets fan. He's a member of the 1973 National League champs. He's on the Mets Rewind podcast. George, 1973 spring training, you had a tough time hitting. You were hitting like 182 under the Mendoza line before Mendoza ever played in the majors. Were you surprised when Yogi took you north on the 25-man roster that season?
Yeah, I was surprised. Not because of that, but just because I didn't expect to make the team. And they basically told me, hey, we're bringing you up north with us, but after 2 weeks when we need another pitcher, you're going to be the one to go down. I got a few chances to play, and I did pretty good, and so they sent my roommate, Rich Childs, down, and I was doing pretty good.
You made your major league debut on April 15, 1973 against the Phils at Veterans Stadium. Who was the pitcher, and how was the outcome?
I pinch hit toward the end of the game against Steve Carlton, and I felt like there's not a left-hander alive that I can't hit. I really felt like I could hit any left-hander. And so anyway, I'm working the count, and it's cold. Boy, I'll bet it was in the 40s. And it gets to be 3-2, and then the next pitch was 6 inches outside, and I'm going to first base, and Shag Crawford says, "You're out, strike 3." Oh, my goodness. I wish I could meet Shag Crawford right now, and we could go over the video. So I'm positive that ball was way outside, but who knows if it was or not.
That's a heck of a way to break in, though, against Steve Carlton.
Well, not only that, in spring training, we were playing St. Louis, and several of our main players, wanted the day off because we're facing Bob Gibson. I got to face him, and so what a thrill that was. The first pitch was high inside. He moved me back, and he glared at me, and which was his typical way. And then I almost hit a home run off of him, but it actually ended up as a weak ground ball to third. But I'll never forget that. Yeah, what a great pitcher and competitor he was.
In your time in the majors, who was the toughest pitcher for you to face?
Well, there's one guy, and his name was Fred Norman, a little left-handed pitcher of Cincinnati. Like I say, I felt like I could hit any left-hander. Well, the first pitch comes sort of high and then drops down. A screwball, strike 1. I says, geez, wait a minute, what was that? And then he threw another one, strike 2, and another one. And it was just like I wasn't prepared for seeing that kind of pitch. That was the worst at bat I think I've ever had.
I read one story that May 1973, and the game was going real slow, and you decided that you were going to pull out a pair of scissors in the dugout and give yourself a haircut. Is that a true story?
Kind of is true. I didn't give me a real haircut, but I had some hair that was growing around my ears and that and bothering me, so... I trimmed it off. Tuck McGraw saw it, and he got a big kick out of that.
Oh, man. So June 1973, you are playing in San Diego against the Padres, and you're batting against them, and you're hit. You described that at-bat to me and where you were hit.
I'm not sure if the count was like one, and the second pitch was a curveball that fooled me, and so it kind of made me pull back, and I said, geez, I'm not going to ever do that again. I'm going to hang in there. Well, then the next pitch was to brush me back. He had me at 1-2 or 0-2 or something like that. It was hard to pick up the ball there. And so anyway, it headed right for my head, and I turned, and it really didn't hit my head. It kind of glanced, hit my glasses, and they did all kinds of precautions thinking I was hurt in that. But I think I could have just got up and given me a new pair of glasses, and I'm ready.
Did you turn into that pitch or away from that pitch?
I turned away, but it was a little too late. Yeah, I spent a day in the hospital and then rejoined the team.
And it broke your glasses, but didn't damage your eyes at all, correct?
That's right.
So describe to me, George, what it's like. I've never been hit in the head with a baseball. What does that feel like, or what did that feel like to you?
That didn't hurt or anything. You know, you get hit in the ribs or in the leg, and that you really get a sting. For myself, you know, people think, oh, you see the ball all the way from the pitcher, and then you swing and take a cut. You don't pick the ball up right from the pitcher. Very often, very few people can pick it up out of their hands and consistently. And so you're picking it up maybe a quarter of the way to the mound. So you have to sort of commit yourself and stay in there. And sometimes I know there's some pitches that whizzed by me, and I said, geez, if that was at me, there's no way I could have gotten out of the way. It was just, you don't always see the ball that well, and of course pitchers will hide the ball at times too. Anyway, it's a kind of a fear that every batter from Little League on up has to kind of learn to deal with. When I was coaching Little League and my son, I used to throw tennis balls at their head and just have them practice getting out of the way so they'd get some confidence of kind of being able to duck away from the ball. In the days after that you were playing, were you a little hesitant to kind of lean in and hang in there on those pitches? Did you bounce back pretty quick? I had a short memory. Yeah, I don't recall being hesitant at all. You know, that's kind of a precursor to one of the most memorable plays in your career that everyone talks about. July 7th, 1973 against the Braves. You're playing left field and Don Hahn is playing center field. Ralph Garr's at the plate, and take me through that at-bat and what happens. First of all, July 4th, hit my first home run up in Montreal, 3-run home run off of Baylor Moore, and give Tom Seaver a nice cushion because he always seemed to have trouble winning up there. And, we were winning the game until all of a sudden Tom's out of the game and they get 6 runs in the 6th or 7th inning, and we end up losing the game. So I was on a high at that point, and then we come back to Shea Stadium. The batter before Ralph Garr hit a ground ball or something, and it got by me, and the guy got an extra base. And I took it personally, and I said, nothing is going to get by me again. Sure enough, Ralph Garr hits one into left center field. I take off as hard as I can, and Don Hahn, who's a great center fielder, takes off hard. Boom, we get to the wall about the same time, and the ball and collide with each other and the wall, and I end up with a dislocated hip, which was agony for 4 hours because they couldn't give me anything as they're trying to get me to the hospital in rush hour traffic. And because they thought they might have to do surgery. And as it turned out, there was nothing broken, so they just gave me a muscle relaxant and then popped it back in. And then I was in traction for a month and on crutches for a month, but I did come back after that. Although I don't think I was ever really quite the same. I had lost some mobility and range of motion in that hip.
In the weeks before that game, you were having, I don't know if it was a single dream or a recurring dream about a situation like that. Can you kind of tell me about that?
Yeah, we were in San Diego, and all of a sudden I'm in a cold sweat, and I'm visualizing I'm being carried off the field, and I'm seeing Kuzman on one side and Tug McGraw on another, and it was just, one of those terror dreams that you don't know why they happen. Well, sure enough, this is what I think ended up happening. And so I believe helping to carry me off on the stretcher as well. So, yeah, that was a strange dream and a stranger thing to have happen. Not too many people will have a dislocated hip in an injury in baseball.
Yeah.
Football, they get quite a few, but not in baseball.
And Don Hahn pretty much walked away from that collision without any major injury. Is that correct?
Well, he had bruised ribs, and I think he missed about 3 or 4 games because of it. He got right back into the swing of things.
How was your relationship with Don Hahn? Did you ever talk to him about that play?
Not necessarily about the play, but he was actually one of my best friends. A good guy. I wonder what's happened to him.
I don't know. You'll need to look him up. Come on, you got to stay in touch with your old friends there in the Pinstripes.
I've tried, but every email I've got it comes back, and other people can't seem to give me a phone number, and so
it's not
if you
easy.
ever find out anything about information about him, let me know.
I certainly will, and maybe Mets fans have some connection with him too, and they'll let us know, and I'll pass it on to you. No problem. You get back into the swing of things in early September of 73. The Mets obviously make an incredible run. People are coming back off the injured list. At one point, there were 7 or 8 players that were on the injured list, and you make that run and you get into the postseason against the Reds. And there's one particular moment in that series that I wanted to talk about was the Pete Rose, Bud Harrelson fight. Where were you? Where were you on the field when it took place, and your memories of that?
That play, I was on the bench. Now, I embellish things a little. Do you want my embellishment, too?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So, anyway, we're because of our pitching, and we had a terrific hitting team, too, when we're all healthy.
Yeah.
We're ahead, and the momentum is all going our way, and knowing Pete Rose, he doesn't like that. He's such a competitor.
Yep.
Anyway, there was a ball hit to Buddy Harrelson. He was on first base. He slides hard into Buddy to break up the double play. Buddy was a little hot-tempered, too, and he didn't take anything from anybody and said some things. And so, here's the embellishment. Pete Rose, after him saying things, he grabbed him by the shirt and threw him down. Of course, all of the bench came out, and I grabbed Pete Rose and I threw him down, and that stopped the fight. Now that didn't happen. What happened was I was taught, if there's a fight, you grab somebody on the other team and just hold them. And so that's kind of what I did.
Okay.
But I was out there in the thing, too.
Just before you get into the playoffs, I want to backtrack just a little bit because there was another game that just came to my mind as we were talking about that, and it was late in that 73 season. You were playing the Pirates, and they now call it the ball off the wall play. Yeah. What was your memory of that?
My memory is that I've seen it about 20 times, which has brought back the memory. That was just, you wonder really why fate happens and who's controlling all of the things that happen. When Dave Augustine hit that ball over Cleon Jones's head, it hit the top corner of the wall, and if it was another inch, it would have hit the top and bounced over and gone over for the home run. But it hit there, and it bounced right back to Cleon. He throws a perfect strike to Buddy Harrelson, who throws a strike to, I think it was Ron Hodges was catching, got the man coming into home out. And we end up winning that game. And Pittsburgh, who had a great team as well that year, we ended up catching them. And that was a big, huge game.
1973 World Series. The Mets had a 3-2 series lead, and it looked like they were going to win it. One of the plays in, I think it was game 2, if I'm correct, was the Bud Harrelson play at the plate. Have you watched that replay? So did he tag him?
And he didn't slide. Yep. He sort of passed the guy, and Willie Mays was on deck, and he's watching it, and he knew he wasn't tagged. But the umpire's view was, they swung the glove toward him, and he called him out.
You finish up your baseball career in 74. After your career, you return to Utah, finish your master's degree in social work, and then what became of that degree, and what did you go on to do?
My specialty in social work was medical social work, and I spent, let's say, about a quarter at a VA hospital in Montana, and getting my degree. And so when I graduated there in 78, the only jobs that were available were in rural VA hospitals. And I had just gotten married, and my wife's a New York girl. That didn't seem like a fit. A bunch of my classmates told me, hey, we're just hired at one of the public school districts, Granite School Districts, in a new program called the Elementary Counseling Program. I went and applied, and they snapped me up, and I took that job as sort of the counselor, social worker for elementary-age kids, and it kind of evolved, and working with special ed, too, gave us some more security, and lo and behold, it ends up a 38-year career, and was something that was absolutely wonderful experience for me.
In 2016, you were named the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce Educator of the Year, George. I mean, when you look back on your professional career, a couple years in baseball, and then 38 years as a counselor to elementary school students, the work you did with those kids lasts a lifetime.
Well, it was meaningful, and every day was different, and see the hope and dreams of kids in their eyes, and just to be a positive role model is a big thing for the younger kids. When I would receive that award, I was a little hesitant because I knew a lot of my colleagues were equal or superior to me, and they all should get awards too. But that was really a big honor, and I appreciated the South Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce. Working in the schools are, they've changed. My major role, I thought, was just building self-esteem and making kids feel good about themselves.
Sure.
And that. And as it evolved, and they wanted more accountability, and you've got to show this happened, and it became more paperwork, and I don't know if it's the right direction.
Yeah, you lose some of that connectivity and that one-on-one time with kids when you become an administrator and have to do a lot of paperwork because you're being pulled away from that time with the kids, so it's got to be difficult, I'm sure.
And I see that with the teachers. It's like they need to become an accountant rather than a nurturing role model. And so, and I was fortunate most 30 plus of my years was at a sort of an inner city school here in Salt Lake, where the last 10 years there was about 70 refugee kids at the school. There was over 30 different languages spoken. Many kids came that didn't speak English, and it was a regular United Nations that to me was energizing. I thought it was just wonderful to see all the different kids and how they work together.
So we'll finish on a couple baseball notes here, George. Your baseball card includes a fun fact on the back that says you love marshmallow shakes. One, is that true? And two, where did you start making marshmallow shakes?
But let me tell you, that again was put on that questionnaire when I first signed the contract. So, they're asking me things that I like, this and that. Oh, that comes with the thing. Well, sure enough, it follows me all along. And, but, it was almost a joke to put it down. And so, but again, it followed me forever.
You played along.
Let me be honest, too.
Sure, okay.
On my card, it has my birth date a year younger than I really am.
Why doesn't that surprise me?
Because the scout, when he signed me, he says, you'll get a better chance if you're 21 rather than 22. So let's just put it like that. And, I'm sure they did a lot of that in the Dominican Republic, because I'd see these kids that are 17 and they're as mature as a 30-year-old.
You played alongside Hall of Famers Tom Seaver and Willie Mays in that 73 season. What was that like for you? Did that have an impact on you, kind of watching them?
I'm a rookie. I'm one that you sit back and you kind of watch and appreciate. And I appreciated Tom, his work ethic, how tough he was, and how serious and calculating and everything. It's not that I would have dinner with him or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I'm a rookie. Stay back,
Yeah.
And same with Willie Mays. And Willie was just a nice guy, very approachable if you talk to him. I'd ask him a couple of things about how, he stays strong for the whole season. And, of course, he just had a magnificent body that he was naturally just strong. Otherwise, I'm one who's just saying, as I finished my career and that and look back and I said, oh, yeah, Yogi Berra was my manager. Willie Mays was my teammate. Tom Seaver was my teammate. And it just, it was like a dream and an honor. It was really an honor to be with them.
I'm sure it was. Here's an interesting question. I always like to see where my interviewee goes with this. What is the most interesting fact about your career that has not been reported?
The World Series, I haven't played in 3 months. And Cleon Jones is out in left field throwing up Shea Stadium. And it's cold, and he's sick the whole game. Well, come about the 7th inning, Yogi sends me out for him. The first ball hit was a line drive, as I recall, into left center field by Sal Bando, and my legs are shaking, and I just reacted and went over and snagged the ball, threw it in like I knew what I was doing. The next ball was a hard-hit single between third and short, and I go down to reach down and catch block the ball and then throw it in. Well, it takes a bad hop and is going over my right shoulder, and I grab it with my bare hand, throw it in. I thought that was the best play in the World Series, and nobody knew about it. So, anyway, welcome to the World Series. Here I haven't played at all, and yet the first few things that happened.
Yeah, the game comes right to you like that, and sometimes fast. Well, George, you have just been a wonderful interview, and I love spending time and talking baseball with you, and I want to take an opportunity to say thank you to your son, Alexander, too, who put us together through social media, and thank you so much to him. Make sure you give him my best.
I will. He's a joy in my life.
George Theodore has been our guest. He is known as the Stork. He was a member of the 1973 NL Champs on the Mets Rewind podcast today. George, take care of yourself. Stay safe during this pandemic season, and we will get together again and talk some more baseball.
Well, thanks for having me, and you and everybody else. Stay safe and wear those masks.